the cold bite of the mountain wind was the first thing I noticed as we set off from the base camp. Our group of 6 trekkers, seasoned but perhaps a bit too confident, had planned this trip for months. We were eager to conquer the snowy peaks and experience the untouched beauty of the mountain. The path ahead seemed endless, a winding trail of white that disappeared into the mist. The snow crunched beneath our boots, each step a reminder of the isolation we had willingly embraced. Little did we know, something far more sinister awaited us. As we ascended, the landscape grew harsher. The once gentle slopes became steep and treacherous. The sun, obscured by heavy clouds, cast an eerie glow over the snow, making the shadows seem alive. I shrugged off the unease, attributing it to the altitude and fatigue. We set up our first camp as the daylight faded. The temperature plummeted, and we huddled around a small fire, its warmth barely penetrating the cold that surrounded us. Conversation was light, filled with laughter and shared stories of past adventures. That night, I struggled to sleep. The wind howled through the mountains, creating ghostly whispers that seemed to call my name. I dismissed it as my imagination, trying to find solace in the rhythmic breathing of my companions. Morning came, and with it, a sense of foreboding. We continued our trek, but something felt off. The shadows seemed to move with us, dark shapes flitting at the edge of our vision. I mentioned it to the group, but they laughed, accusing me of letting the cold get to my head. The higher we climbed, the more the shadows seemed to multiply. They danced across the snow, sometimes taking on forms that resembled human figures. We all saw them, but no one wanted to admit it. It was easier to blame the tricks of light and fatigue. On the 3rd day, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned campsite. Tents, long since collapsed under the weight of snow, stood as silent witnesses to some past tragedy. We searched for clues, but found nothing that explained the eerie sense of dread that hung over the place. As we moved on, the shadows grew bolder. They no longer stayed at the periphery of our vision, but seemed to follow us, closing in whenever we paused. The air felt thicker, colder, and every breath was a struggle. We reached a narrow pass, the only way forward. The shadows crowded the edges of the trail, their presence palpable. One wrong step could send us tumbling into the abyss below. Fear gripped us, but turning back was not an option. Halfway through the pass, the shadows attacked. They emerged from the snow, taking on solid form. Dark figures with hollow eyes, their faces twisted in silent screams. Panic set in, and we ran, pushing each other to reach the safety of the wider path ahead. We collapsed on the other side, hearts pounding, breaths coming in ragged gasps. No one spoke, the horror of what we had just experienced too fresh. The shadows had retreated, but we knew they were still there, watching. That night, our fire seemed to offer no warmth. The shadows danced around the edges, just beyond the light. We took turns keeping watch, sleep eluding us. I wondered how much longer we could endure this. The following day, we found a small cave and decided to take shelter. It offered a brief respite from the relentless wind and the ever-present shadows. As we rested, We discussed our next move. Returning the way we came seemed impossible. The shadows would never let us pass. We decided to press on, hoping to find another route down the mountain. The shadows seemed to sense our determination, becoming more aggressive. They darted between the trees, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. One of our group, Sarah, stumbled and fell. A shadow reached out, its touch freezing her in place. We rushed to her aid, but the shadow melted into the snow before we could react. Sarah was shaken but unhurt, her eyes wide with terror. As we moved forward, we encountered more signs of past trekkers. Abandoned gear, tattered clothing, and even a few skeletal remains. The shadows seemed to be leading us somewhere, their intentions unclear, but undeniably malevolent. We reached a plateau, a vast expanse of snow with no visible path. The shadows circled us, closing in. Desperation set in as we realized we were being herded like prey. We needed to find a way out before it was too late. In the distance, we spotted a faint trail leading down the mountain. It was our only hope. We pushed forward, the shadows nipping at our heels. The descent was steep and dangerous, but fear drove us on. The trail led us to a dense forest, the trees offering some protection from the shadows. We paused to catch our breath, the shadows momentarily halted by the thick undergrowth. We knew it was only a temporary reprieve. As we navigated the forest, the shadows continued to stalk us, their whispers growing more urgent. We came across an old cabin, its roof caved in and walls covered in ice. It seemed like a good place to rest, but none of us dared enter. We set up camp outside the cabin, keeping the fire burning bright. The shadows seemed hesitant to approach, but their presence was still felt. We took turns keeping watch, the tension palpable. That night, I had a dream. The shadows spoke to me, their voices a chorus of despair. They told me of a curse that had befallen the mountain, trapping the souls of those who had perished in the snow. They were doomed to wander, seeking new victims to join their ranks. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. I shared my dream with the others, and to my surprise, they had similar experiences. The shadows had visited each of us, their message clear. We needed to break the curse or suffer the same fate. We decided to search the cabin for clues. Inside, we found old journals and maps detailing the journeys of those who came before us. One journal stood out, its pages filled with desperate pleas for help and warnings about the shadows. The journal mentioned a ritual, a way to break the curse and free the trapped souls. It required a specific location high in the mountains and a series of incantations. It was a long shot, but it was our only hope. With renewed determination, we set off to find the location described in the journal. The shadows seemed to sense our purpose, their attacks growing fiercer. We pressed on, driven by the need to end this nightmare. The journey was grueling, the altitude and cold taking their toll. We reached the site, a circle of stones buried under the snow. The shadows gathered around us, their whispers a cacophony of despair. We followed the instructions in the journal, chanting the incantations as the shadows closed in. The ground trembled, and a blinding light erupted from the circle. The shadows screamed, their forms disintegrating in the light. When the light faded, the shadows were gone. The mountain was silent, the curse lifted. We collapsed, exhausted but relieved. The nightmare was over, and we had survived. We made our way down the mountain, the journey much easier without the constant threat of the shadows. The snow seemed less hostile, the wind less biting. We felt a sense of peace, knowing we had freed the trapped souls. At the base camp, we were greeted with astonishment. We had been gone longer than expected, and search parties had been organized. Our story was met with disbelief, but the evidence of our ordeal was undeniable. In the weeks that followed, we tried to return to our normal lives, but the memories of the shadows haunted us. We had faced something beyond comprehension, and it had left its mark on each of us. I found solace in writing, documenting our journey in hopes that others would understand. The mountain remained a mystery, its secrets buried under the snow. I warned future trekkers to stay away, but I knew the allure of the peaks would draw them in. Sarah and I became close, bonded by our shared trauma. We often spoke of the shadows, trying to make sense of what we had experienced. We knew the mountain would never truly let us go, its icy grip forever etched in our minds. The shadows no longer haunted my dreams, but their presence lingered. I could still hear their whispers in the wind, a reminder of the curse we had broken. I wondered if the souls we freed had found peace, or if they were still wandering, searching for an escape. As time passed, the events of our trek became a distant memory, but the impact remained. I found myself drawn to the mountains, a strange compulsion to return. I resisted, knowing that some things are better left untouched. The others moved on with their lives, but we stayed in touch, forever connected by the shadows in the snow. We spoke of organizing a reunion, a chance to confront our fears, and perhaps find closure. In the end, we decided to meet again at the base camp. We stood at the edge of the trail, looking up at the peaks that had nearly claimed us. The shadows were gone, but their legacy remained. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of finality. The mountain had taken something from us, but it had also given us a bond that could never be broken. We had faced the shadows and survived, our stories forever intertwined in the snow.